Hello and welcome to HD's weekly talk show, The Interview, and our special segment, Coffee on Sunday, wherein we bring you well-known and interesting people and take them through their life and times. Jay and Jagi are kind of household names in Odisha. They are a made-for-each-other couple, their love story reading like a Bollywood script. But there is much more to them. Jay Panda is a committed politician who broke away from his parent party and donned the saffron. Jagi, on the other hand, started off as a model, but today has a well-established business empire. We have with us Jagi and Jay Panda in this edition of Coffee on Sunday. Welcome to the show, Bajant, rather Jay and Jagi Mangat Panda, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Let me begin with from Bajant Panda to Jay Panda. Take me through that journey, the little boy who grew up to be a well-known but reluctant politician.
Well, the politics actually did happen accidentally. I'm not from a political family, and in my student days, I had lived outside the country for almost a decade. And when I came back to India in the 1990s, it was very difficult for me to adjust. I was from a business family, and dealing with the red tape and the corruption was very frustrating. Rather than just complain about it, I was looking for ways to do something about it, and politics happened. Politics is, of course, not the be-all or the end-all. There are many ways one can bring about change. One can bring about it through social change, through starting new business ventures. My attitude towards politics now it's been 25 years, is encapsulated in the title of my first book, which was called Lutyens Maverick. The idea is that policies and governance for this huge country is actually run out of what is the Lutyens zone in Delhi. And yet, there is a tendency for people who spend long periods of time here to stay in a bubble and not be connected with what's actually happening in real India. And I was very clear from the beginning that I must have one foot here to help shape policy and governance, and one foot solidly in what I would call real India, which is still largely rural, and bringing about a balance of these two, I think, is critical to today's politics.
You're sounding so much like Prime Minister Modi, who somehow despises the Lutyens Delhi.
Look, of course, Prime Minister Modi is very inspirational. Throughout the world, he's widely recognized as the most popular people's leader. And you can see that in the kind of recognition that he gets when he goes to the US or Australia or the Middle East and other parts of the world. I don't think Lutyens Delhi is to be despised as it is to be understood and dealt with, because it is the nerve center of government. It is also the nerve center of many opinion makers who for decades have helped shape the narrative in India. But there is a vast India out there that if you go beyond a 30-kilometer radius from Lutyens Delhi, I have often found people to be disconnected. I have often found people to form their opinions based on discussions and opinions and feelings within this 30-kilometer radius.
Before I ask you if you have settled to the red tape, which you had not before you joined politics, let me ask you, Jagi, what is your take on Lutyens Delhi?
Like Jai mentioned, that it's to be understood more than despised. I do agree, although I don't spend much time in Delhi. As you know, most of my time is spent in Odisha.
Willfully?
Yes, because of my work, of course, and so I think it's got to be understood more than despised. Yes.
Have you settled to the red tape, and do you think he has settled to the red tape?
No, no.
I think he'll be able to answer that better.
Look, reconciling with the status quo had been the norm, because politics, and especially this power center of politics, the Lutyens zone, had become very incestuous. There's a lot of nepotism. There's a lot of old boys network. There's a very clubby atmosphere of wink wink and nudge nudge, sab chalta hai. But I have always believed that politics is a vehicle for bringing about change for the better. And I'm very proud that that's what's happening. So, for example, in recent times, under Prime Minister Modi, for instance, well over 1,000 old laws have been discarded. Some of these laws and rules and regulations go back to colonial times. And as the shackles are removed, you're seeing that today. A huge number of unicorns, well over 100 now. The third largest ecosystem for startups in the world. These are made possible by removing the red tape. A lot of changes have happened. For example, the goods and services tax. If you remember, when it was pending for 2 decades, and when it happened, there was a lot of resistance. And yes, there were some teething troubles initially, but anything that replaces a massive old system would have teething troubles. Most people who don't have a political agenda acknowledge it as a very revolutionary transformation. All of these do not happen with the same old status quo. They have happened with a great deal of sweeping away of the cobwebs of red tape.
While on transition from the BJD to the BJP, tell me about that.
That's a very valid question. Now, there's a little backstory that not many people know about. The BJD was formed with the help and assistance of the BJP. This is 25 years ago. And that's why the day after it was formed, an alliance was announced between the BJD and the BJP. I played a key role and in helping the formation of the BJD and the alliance. Right from the beginning, I was very clear about the common agenda that the BJP and the BJD wanted to take forward. Although I joined the BJP actually directly much later, but my stands have always been exactly what the BJP has stood for. I stood for doing away with the VIP culture, which finally happened after Prime Minister Modi took office. I stood for things like GST. I stood for things like Aadhaar. I stood for many such policy issues which the BJP has championed. When that alliance broke, I was a fish out of water in the BJD because it took a different turn. The people who had been involved, people who knew the late Biju Patnaik, were gradually shunted out. It's run in a totally different manner. The core philosophies and the beliefs and the ethics are very different. And so it was, I clearly had to make that shift instead of being in a party which had been in alliance with BJP to be in the BJP. And I've always felt at home in the BJP.
Is that one of the reasons why, while in the BJD, you were called pro-BJP and towing the BJP line?
But that was my job. As the parliamentary leader of the BJD and in alliance with the BJP, it was my specific job to have good relations with the BJP.
Jagi, from BJD to BJP, what has been the transformation? in your view, as you see it?
In my view, as you know, to start with, that I was never in favor of Jai getting into politics.
I was going to, that was my next question actually.
But I think it's important to put that in place in order to, explain whether I do see a difference or the journey bit from BJD to BJP. That the reason being that he doesn't come from a political background, political family. They've never dabbled in real politics. So I thought that he would not fit into politics. But I'm pleasantly surprised to see the transformation Jai has made from being a business person to a politician, and that is a first transformation that I've seen. But as far as the moving from BJD to BJP, as a person, as a politician, he hasn't changed anything. There hasn't been much change that I see in terms of him supporting certain policies or in terms of him believing in certain things that he needs to do for the country. I don't think that have changed because he's been very consistent in that. What has, of course, changed is the kind of reaction that we saw from the BJD when he shifted to the BJP, which was quite negative, I thought.
Political witch hunt is what you said.
Correct. That's the only thing that I strongly felt, because I was based in much more in Odisha, and Jai had moved to Delhi because he was the national vice president. So we were right there in Odisha, and obviously we got attacked. We got the brunt of this shift that happened for Jai from BJD to BJP, because we were right there and they decided that they should basically, target me instead of him. And of course, I've gone out many a times and said that you have a problem with Jai, you should deal with him. And we are a media house and have no connections with politics or politicians, so we should be left alone.
But tell me, how difficult has it been for you, or is it for you, to do business in a state which is actually hounding you? And because they are bearing the brunt of your decisions, how guilty do you feel?
Well, of course it bothers me when, she and her colleagues and associates were slapped with some 24 cases in a matter of 10 days. When other members of my family who are in business for 6 decades, again got harassed with the state-supported vandalism. But I myself was also, of course, harassed when I was physically assaulted by members of my old political party with 5 platoons of police standing by and doing nothing.
But feeling guilty?
I do feel bad, of course, when they are harassed, when, they literally got the midnight knock with employees being picked up on fabricated charges at 3 a.m. in the morning, literally breaking the door down. You don't think such things happen now. You heard about such things happening during the emergency. But in modern India, for such things to happen, these are terrible. And of course, it bothers me.
How terrible were those moments? And did you see him down and out, if I may use the term? And how did he handle it? And how did you handle it?
He, of course, I don't think was down and out. And at the same time, I have learned to fight my battles myself for a while now. And I decided that I should deal with them all by myself. So I really didn't go out and reach out and say, please help me or anything. But yes, it was quite terrible because, it takes away our time, from basically our focus from work to dealing with 200 other cases at that point. So yes, it was a very, very bad period for us.
What about the will?
Oh, that I have plenty of it. Having
fighter.
Been in the business for 26, 27 years, and having started a company in Odisha itself was quite a challenge to start with. Yeah. And, having faced those kind of challenges, I was used to being very, very tough in terms of dealing with people who are unfair, so to say. So yeah, it was difficult, but yeah, I took it in my stride, and we continue to deal with a lot of those cases even now.
But tell me, were there moments, especially when you saw her bearing the brunt, saying, oh God, I wish I hadn't?
I never thought that I wish I hadn't, because getting into politics, one knew that it could be dirty. But what took me by surprise is that a party with which I had been associated since the founding, had been its parliamentary leader in the Rajya Sabha, had been its NDA coordinator, would stoop to such levels as physical violence against me. Despite knowing that politics can get, there's a seedy underbelly, it really shook me up.
And I think it's more not that he should think that I wish I hadn't. I think he must have thought, I wish they don't. I wish they didn't, especially Naveen Babu being a friend.
A friend? Would you still say that?
Was a friend.
Well, there was a very close family friendship for 3 generations. The house in which Naveen lives in was made possible because my father took over Biju uncle's businesses which had defaulted, and the house was about to be auctioned. This is going back nearly half a century. So there was that kind of closeness.
What would you say now?
No, I mean, of course, we are not in touch. I left the party because neither he nor anybody from that party attended my father's funeral. But the past is the past.
Before you joined the BJP, you moved several private members' bills, and 2, let me mention, to replace the penalizing sedition and another to remove restraints on free speech. Don't you think in the BJP, both these issues are a casualty?
Absolutely
and you are
not.
in that sense backing the wrong
absolutely
horse.
not. Look, the issue about sedition and free speech is very critical to a modern democracy, and they go hand in hand. It's very clear that we must have free speech, but free speech has a certain definition. Now, free speech cannot mean that you are helping foist a rebellion against the state. So, sedition is a colonial era law, but most free countries today, for example, the US is the second largest democracy, is considered as a shining example of democracy, has laws against treason. So, if you stop calling it sedition and you call it treason, then I think a lot of clarity emerges from it. The old saying is, my freedom to extend my arm ends before it touches your nose. And that's that boundary that must be clearly understood. Free speech is something that ought to have a great deal of leeway, and physical actions to overturn the state or to compromise the republic is not free speech.
Oversimplification, I think, because the way the BJP uses, and I may use the word misuses this, really goes beyond the definition that you're talking about or the universal definition.
That's not true at all. First, let's be very clear. It was in the era of our first Prime Minister that curbs on free speech were put into place. Before that, the concept of free speech, as Dr. Ambedkar and others were drafting, was free speech where you could say anything and get away with it. But at that time, the restrictions that were placed put so-called reasonable restrictions on free speech. You're pointing fingers at the BJP, but look at how so many state governments have misused it. Look at how she has been hauled up for simply reporting assembly proceedings. Look at how 2 girls in Maharashtra were hauled up under the sedition law, misuse of the sedition law. Look at how people in Bengal, people in Kerala have been hauled off to jail, given jail sentences, misusing these provisions in the law. So don't blame the BJP about it. Let's be very clear, it is not an oversimplification, and this is the classical definition, that your speech cannot extend to, for example, carrying messages for Naxalites who are ambushing our armed forces. It cannot include organizing food and camps for other revolutionaries who are trying to overthrow the republic. That's not free speech. And if you do that, the state should take action against you, whether you call it sedition, whether you call it treason. I personally think that we should have a completely liberal free speech, but our constitution, as put into place by the, in the regime of the first Prime Minister, has certain restrictions. So unless we build a consensus around the country as to what those reasonable restrictions are and are not, We can't have an agreement on this.
So everything goes back to Nehru and the Gandhis.
No, but it is unquestionable that while Nehruji contributed to our independence and while he contributed to the establishment of our republic, he also made severe blunders. He gave up India's seat, an opportunity to have a seat in the Security Council. He certainly mismanaged the border with China and lost the war in 1962. So let's not treat anybody as gods. Pandit Nehru, others have contributed, but they also have flaws which we should not shy away.
Your take on free speech and media?
Just
and I'm not talking only about the state government.
I know. Just so that I don't make a political statement or opinion, I would rather stay away from it, because that is the philosophy of my company as well. In OTV, we refrain from giving opinions. We have always said, and our tagline is, we report, you decide. So I want to stay away from giving any opinion on these issues lest it becomes political.
Okay, I'll let you get away with it.
Thank you.
Technically, there is only a one-letter difference between the BJD and the BJP. How different are both these parties, and how different are both the leaders, Naveen Patnaik and Narendra Modi?
In the beginning, there was a great deal of overlap because, as I said, under the guidance of Vajpayee ji and Advani ji, the late Pramod Mahajan was the mentor who helped guide and form the BJD. Naveen Patnaik was the founder, and a few of us were involved in helping him. And so a great deal of commonality. The BJD is a regional party. Now the BJP as a national party espouses not just our nationalist roadmap, but also the aspirations of every region. The BJP really does aspire for a transformation of India in every good sense and carrying every aspiration with us, including regional aspirations.
What is your take on India with the 5 full stops and the opposition alliance?
Renaming somebody is not going to solve their problems. The problem that UPA faces, and it is really UPA just renamed as INDIA. The problem that UPA faces is they are seen by the vast majority of the people as being dynasts. Most of them are dynasts. They are seen as not having a national aspiration. They are constantly trying to create groups and subgroups and create hostility among them to create vote banks. That has been their tradition for so many decades. That is why they overturned the Shah Bano judgment in 1986. The UPA's biggest problem was it has fraternized with everybody who has tried to harm India. They did not take action against terrorists based across the LOC. They didn't take action against the stone throwing in Kashmir, and they used to fraternize with the Tukde Tukde gang who were against India. So this is just a desperate attempt to call themselves INDIA. It's like a schoolboy being told to come up with a gimmicky new name, and he says, I'm Tarzan. He doesn't become Tarzan if he names himself Tarzan. The fact is, you just can't rename yourself and suddenly pretend that you are a different animal than what you are.
Okay, Jagi, I'm not going to let you get away by saying no politics. Okay, fair enough, no politics. Let me talk about your love story. But was it love at first sight for you?
It was, of course. And it's just that, as a young girl, at that point, one is very guarded, right? So although it was love at first sight, of course, I didn't want him to know about it.
She made me sweat for it.
Yes, not because I wanted you to sweat, but it was just one of those things that you're very guarded, right, about guys that you met for the first time. So yeah, it was more like that. But I must confess, it was love at first sight.
That's a confession I don't think you've heard before.
Well, I mean, we've been married for a while, So for both of us, it was, I mean, the moment I saw her, I'd never seen anybody as beautiful as her. And I still feel the same way.
But tell me, the circumstances were interesting, if I may use the term. And you did say the moment was magical. But with a bomb threat looming large, seriously?
Well, you know, the bomb threat was found to be false. So we got very engrossed talking, and we had long hours there at the
8 hours.
transit airport. Yes, at the transit airport.
And you were so smitten by her that you forgot to take her phone number.
I was intimidated, I think.
Intimidated?
Well, I mean, she was gorgeous, and she was modeling in Paris, and but you know, it was destiny, because a couple of days later we bumped into each other again at Heathrow Airport, and the second time I didn't make that mistake again, and I took her number.
Tell me about your first commercial with a soap company.
Yeah. So this was with Palmolive, and so there were 3 models. There was Aishwarya Rai, there was Shanaz Treasurywala, and myself. And it was very exciting for me, because as a first commercial to be working with these, especially with Aishwarya, so I was pretty kicked.
And from there to setting up your own TV channels and doing films. Tell me about that journey.
When I moved to Odisha, and I got married and moved to Odisha, as I had never lived in Odisha or been to Odisha actually. You know, as a kid, I really didn't hear much about Odisha, so it wasn't the most exciting place that I was looking to go to.
And when people said, why don't you go and see what the place is like, you said, the man is important and not the place.
Correct. So I said, it doesn't matter, you know, where he lives, because I know that I'm getting married to the guy because I love him, and it doesn't matter where I live. I'm sure I'll find something to do, because and I told Jay that when I move to Odisha, no matter what, I'm going to find something to do. So I think this need to do something was the reason how I found what I'm doing right now.
But isn't that, putting it mildly, something to do, considering your channel is one of the prime?
Yes, it just so happened that, you know, when I was frantically looking for something to do, I came across this this project. I took it not knowing what I was getting into, and the challenges after that were enormous.
Something to do is what Jagi is saying. Do you think the way the TV channels has come up, is it really something to do, and as mild as something to do, also considering that it keeps her away? She's in Odisha, you're in Delhi. So if she didn't have that something to do, probably she would be more in Delhi.
First of all, I believe that whatever Jagi had decided to do, she would have made a success of it, because she's nothing if not perseverant. She perseveres way beyond the limits when most people give up. I'm very proud of that. Yes, of course, it keeps her in Odisha, and my political positioning keeps me a lot outside Odisha. But I'm from Odisha. My politics has to be rooted in the ground. I go to Odisha regularly. She comes to Delhi at least once a month, so we get to spend time together in that sense.
Both of you have many common and separate interests. Tell me about both.
Should I, or? Okay. So the areas we share, of course, is that we both love reading similar books. So history is something that I got interested because of Jay. And I must give some credit to Naveen Patnaik here also.
Grudgingly?
Not grudgingly, willingly give him the credit to have introduced me to some very nice books of history. So we have similar taste there. We love watching films together. We love traveling together. So these are the commonalities that we have. And of course, the areas that I don't get into is politics for sure, the number one on top.
Underlined?
I stay away from it, miles away from it.
Tell me about the forging signature story.
Well, it's not something I should be proud about.
No, that's okay. It happened as a kid, so it's all right.
Yes, I was 17 and I was studying abroad, and I wanted to do skydiving.
You have a piano which you do not know how to play.
She knows a little bit.
I used to.
A little bit.
To,
she hasn't really kept up much with it, but she used to play
And you have a picture of Mao holding a Louis Vuitton bag. Which
That is, see, a lot of people don't understand that painting. I think a couple of friends have asked me why I have that painting up there. And I asked them to look at it and understand the satire. So that painting shows Mao Zedong in one of his famous poses, but in his hands he has painted a Louis Vuitton bag. So the satire there is, of course, that China is supposed to be a communist country, yet it is completely materialistic. And the communism is really only a facade to keep control of the country and government. No, I'm certainly not a fan of Mao.
Both of you are romantics, die-hard romantics. But you've said that Jagi perhaps has an edge. Just explain that to me.
Well, both of us are very practical. Both of us...
That's putting it so politically correctly.
No, in terms of our professions, you know, she's faced the hurly-burly and the challenges of doing business, and I've done that in politics. So, but in terms of romanticism, of course, I mean, we enjoy private time together. We occasionally have a candlelit dinner together.
You invite her, she invites you.
But sometimes
When
me,
it
sometimes
comes to food and dinner, it's always Jay's decision.
I invite her to these quiet dinners, and she invites me to some of these travels that she goes on, exotic places.
What about the hiring the limo story and the 100 roses?
In New York, when I think it was our first date, and to impress her, I hired a limousine and took a huge bouquet of roses.
100?
It was 100. And made reservations at a fancy restaurant. And when I turned up, I thought I was on the right track, but she put me,
It was impressive, but at the same time, I got even more suspicious.
So her immediate feedback was, look, all this is nice, but it's unnecessary. I want to see you for who you are, and you don't need to impress me with all these attempts.
Poor guy. You gave him a tough time.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, that I was very guarded.
So when you proposed to her, you didn't take roses, I presume?
No. I didn't take any roses. No. So basically, it became quite clear to me, she is not in it for any of the luxuries or any of the symbolism, and she really liked me as a person and wanted to see if that is who I really was. And I really liked spending time with her.
He's madly in love with you, Jagi.
So am I.
Okay. Confession time.
Yes.
Jagi, that was my last question to him. But let me ask you, both of you took a conscious decision not to have children. Looking back, do you think it was a decision taken in haste?
We did think that we had decided not to have kids, but that was for a different reason. We wanted to adopt a lot of kids. So looking back, I actually regret that we did not adopt too many kids, which we had started thinking of. So I don't think we regret the fact that we don't have kids, but we just didn't have the time to get into the process, because even adoption is a big process. And I think we didn't get into that.
Well, I want to add that we have adopted one of our relatives who had
Lipiksha, that's the name.
Letitia.
Yes, Letitia
Is our daughter.
Yes.
Jagi and Jay, I'm dropping the panda. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. It was
very
a pleasure.
much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.